My name is Mary Bricker-Jenkins. I am a retired teacher of social work and social welfare history, but continue my work as a conscious member of the working class and the movement to end poverty. Well, it's particularly interesting for me to follow in this conversation Frances Fox Piven, because I was on the other side of the desk when Frances was organizing welfare recipients to claim their entitlements, and they were indeed entitlements. I was a welfare worker. I was not only a welfare worker and supervisor toward the end of the movement, but I had also entered that as a member of the Young Republicans, who had been raised in very privileged circumstances and who had inherited certain theories about poverty and poor people that really in many ways placed me completely at the opposite end of the political spectrum. But I was experiencing that during that time a great deal of what we now call cognitive dissonance, because the experience of the lives of the people with whom I was working, the people who were applicants and recipients of welfare, simply, those experiences, simply as I could perceive them, didn't fit with the theories that I had inherited from my Republican, intensely capitalist family. So naturally I started questioning and was very fortunate to be guided to a meeting one night of a group of social workers who were organizing to support the welfare rights movement. So through my conversations with them, which lasted many, many years, and the work that I did as a part, really, of the welfare rights movement, I was equipped with better theory. And it's in the pursuit of that theory and constantly in pursuit of testing a theory against experience that I have been able to be to make a contribution to the movement to end poverty. Well, of course, what I was taught was that if you were poor, it was your own fault. You know, you were somehow defective. I mean, even the image of a safety net reinforces that notion. I mean, what is a safety net? It's a net that you put under people who are doing things that are risky, like living, but who make a mistake. And if they make a mistake, they fall into the safety net so that they don't die. Right? That's the image of the safety net. Well, so what is the conclusion of that? That you only have a safety net, you only need a safety net when people make mistakes, right? So poor people were poor because they made mistakes. They made bad choices, or, you know, the explanation was certainly not there's something wrong with an economic system that says that less than true full employment is okay. There was always a flaw, a moral flaw, such as, oh my goodness, they had sex too young, right? They shouldn't have had sex. I mean, rich people could have sex. They would go, some of my classmates would go to Switzerland to take care of the consequences of that. But poor people, of course, did not have that as an option. They had welfare. Right? We started talking about deadbeat dads when we really should have been talking about unemployed dads, right? These are the kinds of things that when you actually heard people's stories and how it was that they made the choices that they made, the choices that they made perfect sense. And they were working very, very, very hard to provide safety, comfort, and care for their children in the most dire circumstances. So then one really had to ask, what would relieve this kind of situation? What would make it possible for people to survive and thrive, even if they did make a mistake? The safety net is insufficient. We need to. I think this fellow Sean from Ireland said it very well. First of all, the first thing we need to do is to redefine what we mean by work. It's not a job. It's a contribution to the well-being of the people in the planet. Now, I know that not everybody can join a protest movement that is specifically directed to people who are, let's say, on welfare recipients. Right? I think Francis is absolutely right that we have to work where we are. However, the part that I think is terribly important is that we not only act, but that we study why we have to act and how we can act. To me, the linchpin in a movement is the becoming conscious of why you have to act in the first place and what the possibilities are. And I have to say that because I was working during that period of the welfare rights movement in the 60s and the early 70s, and because many of my friends had come out of the Mobilization for Youth experience, it was difficult for me to take the positions that I often had to take, because the other part of me was rooted in my family and in that theory about why people were poor. But it also helped me understand the power of what we now refer to as the ruling class, or the 1%. And I felt very strongly, and I think I was quite correct, that the making of trouble without the concomitant study of why we were making trouble and the potential for that trouble and the environment in which we were making it actually led to a lot of punishing response. So I challenged, actually, I took a class with Richard Cloward, and I challenged him. I said, I don't think you really understand the power of rich people. They're going to strike back, and in fact, they did. And a lot of people suffered. Now, that doesn't mean that we should not have done what we did to mobilize people to claim their rights. That was very important. What I think we needed to do, however, was to study much more deeply what would happen as a result, and to start figuring out how we might respond to that. Now, because we're doing that now, I think, in the movement, we've come to understand the power of this particular moment in history. In the United States, we have perfected the capitalist model. I don't think we're talking about bad people. We're talking about bad theory. And the implementation of that theory makes absolutely perfect sense. Pursued to its limit, as Francis said earlier, we will destroy the planet. And we're already destroying people. Okay, you grew up in Germany, and fascism was a part of your history. The fascism of Germany had as its root, in many ways, the merger of industrial capitalists and the state. Most people think of fascism as brown shirts and whatnot, but really that's it. And in many ways, that's what we're experiencing here in the United States today. And I don't think that there is a capitalist, particularly not a finance capitalist, who would think of himself or herself that way today as a fascist. But that merger of the interests of capital, and particularly finance capital, and the state is such that the way it gets played out is not only harmful to the planet, but people really are dying. You know, people really are dying. Vicious things are happening to people. The amount of surveillance that goes on, why is that necessary? Why is it necessary to have deep surveillance of people who are trying to get water turned on for poor families in Detroit? What is that about? We really have moved from industrial capitalism, and we're toward the end of that period, and I think Francis is absolutely right, we have moved into financial capitalism. But more importantly, we have changed the fundamental process of production of the goods and services that we need to sustain life. And with the electronically based condition that we have at this time, we have to stop thinking in terms of the welfare state and surplus labor and that theory that fed so well an earlier stage of capitalism. And we really need to start thinking about the creation of this new section of our class, which is huge, that some people refer to as the precariat, although I think it's larger than the precariat, the superfluous labor that we have, and how that is going to be, that section of the population can be organized to become a conscious political motion in this country. And it has to be a conscious, it has to be a studied motion, not just a protest movement. There is something that is so fundamentally revolutionary about saying people's basic human needs must be met. What we need for survival should be at the core of our society and the way we think about our society. There is something so revolutionary about that, and I mean that very literally, that we are experiencing our leaders being thrown into jail, people afraid to go to certain meetings, people being worried about, a friend of mine says, in poor communities, people are more afraid of the social workers than they are of the police, right? Because the police can throw you in jail, but the social workers can take your children, and that's worse. That's worse. So, you know, it's when we're talking about meeting basic human needs and organizing to meet basic human needs, we are really talking about creating a fundamentally different system. And that system, the theory behind that system and the practice behind that system is so at odds with the theory and practice of capitalism at this stage that we are experiencing an almost total control over our lives, and we have to realize that that pushing our agenda is going to be considered very dangerous by some. Now, the salvation in all of this, I'm not saying this is all doomsday, because the salvation in all of this is that we really have the capacity, given the electronic production and support of distribution of goods and services around the world that we need for survival. We really do have that, and we can come through this not only surviving, but with a system that that will preserve people and planet. We can do that. I'm very optimistic about this moment. This is perhaps for the first time in history, on a large scale, we can live without that relationship between labor and capital that we've assumed to be eternal. We can live without that and still have the abundance that we need. So I'm very optimistic. Now, how we get there is going to be rough. I mean, when they throw our leaders in jail, when they cut off water to thousands of families in Detroit, and it's coming around the country, when we commodify everything, not just water, but our health services, everything is commodified. When we do all of that, we're living in a period of great danger, but it's also a period of great opportunity. So how we do this, for me, I think, is we dig deep and we get into those struggles around what people need to survive. And as I said earlier, we not only do we act in those struggles, but we study why we are doing them and why it's necessary to do them. And we envision an alternative, and we go step by step toward that alternative. And that means that we're going to have to give up some ideas, I think, about well, people talk a lot about skill sets, okay? I had an experience that exposed to me a particular skill set early on in the movement. I moved to Philadelphia to teach at Temple University from the South. And I called a friend of mine who worked for an alternative funding agency and organization. And I said, what's going on in Philadelphia that I would be interested in? I'd been an activist for a long time. And she said, oh, you need to get hold of the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. And she said, we've given them some money, but right now they don't have an office and they don't have a telephone, but see if you can find them. So I said, oh, okay. And sure enough, I saw that people from the Kensington Welfare Rights Union were going to give a talk at the University of Pennsylvania, sponsored by the School of Social Work. So even though I was at Temple School of Social Work and we didn't like the people at Penn, I said, well, I got to go to this. I'll just go incognito. So, so I went, and I was very moved by what they were saying. Not just emotionally, but also intellectually, the analysis that they were putting forward. So I went up to Sherry Honkala afterwards, and I said, I just moved here, and I'd like to work with you. And she said, well, who are you? What do you do? And I said, well, I'm an academic and I teach social work. So immediately she said, oh, okay, well, come around and see what we can do. I mean, I was really a bit naive about how welcome I would be. But I started going around. KWRU had just taken over an abandoned church. And many families were living in this abandoned church because otherwise they were homeless, right? So I started going around, and somebody from KWRU noticed that I was coming to the meetings in a truck, a pickup truck. Moved from the South, I had a truck, I was a farmer. Right? So eventually Sherry came up and she said, we got a job for you. She said, we want you to carry kerosene in your truck to the takeover houses. Right? Not teach social work, not help us even get on welfare, but take the kerosene to the takeover houses, right? Doing that, and then also attending the study groups that everybody was expected to attend was a watershed moment in my life. That's when I began to understand, not that we needed to be Mother Teresa's but we needed to be Oscar Ramirez, right, in our approach to poverty. But that wouldn't have happened without the study that went along with the action. Okay, first of all, a couple of clarifications, okay? It wasn't so much what I learned about poor people. It's what I learned about all of us, including myself, right? That the system that we have now places us all at risk. It's not just those people. It's all of us. It's all of us in our planet. That's what I learned. So I would not, as a person who has at one time had privilege, go to privileged people and say, "Oh no, you need to have more compassion." That's not the message. The message is we are at risk, and we have enormous opportunities. We are at risk because of our pursuit of this particular economic system to its logical conclusion, and we have the conditions, given where we are in technology, to create a system that will be safe for all of us. The other clarification I have to tell you is that my family disowned me because of my work with people who are living in poverty. I don't say poor people, by the way. I say people who are living in poverty. And for that reason, the statement was, you will not get any family money because you will give it to poor people, and we hate poor people. That was the statement. So first of all, I don't think anybody in the club would listen to me at this point. And I'm not sure that they're the people that I would want to talk with. The people that I want to talk with, as I mentioned the other night, are the people who have been displaced, the people who have been rendered superfluous by our economic progress, really. Those are the people who have a vested interest, a deep vested interest in creating a different kind of way to meet human needs, which is, for me, basic income guarantee, big, or whatever the mechanism is called, right? Those are the people with whom I want to spend my time talking, because they have nothing to lose, just as people who are living in poverty have nothing to lose. This is one class, and we have one cause, and that cause is to create a system in which the means of survival are available to everywhere. And I think Carl put it very well the other day. Nobody should come between you and your means of survival. That's a possibility today, as it's never been before. So let's do it. Those are the people that will get into motion. People in the ruling class, or the 1%, or whatever we call it, they're not going to get into motion in this other than resisting it, okay? And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they are pursuing a theory and a practice that they really believe is absolutely essential for survival. So we really have a clash of theory and practice here. And it's going to take huge numbers of people getting in touch with the reasons that they are in the position that they are in, forming a conscious political motion. And I think that's necessary and possible. That's what I'm working on. We need people to write. We are very busy getting the water turned on, getting the electricity turned on. Those of us who are doing the hands-on work, we are very busy doing that. And we are also busy studying, but we don't have time to write. Now, I've done quite a bit of writing, actually, in the course of the years when I was an academic. But right now, I'm just busy doing, right? And we need people who have access to audiences, particularly audiences of students, much more than other academics, to help us with the writing. However, we have experienced a great deal of exploitation of that writing from people who feel that they're doing a very positive thing, and they are, writing about our work. But those books, and I've of course read scores of them, often fail because the people have not done the work and have not done the study with us. They are imposing analyses and theories that don't fit with the experience. So I go right back to that cognitive dissonance that has to be resolved. So I would want academics to get deeply involved in the work and in the study that we do, and to listen with great respect, not only to the words, but to the heartbeat of the people that are struggling for survival. That's where we need folks. We need people who are struggling for survival. And I include not only people who are, quote, quote, on welfare. I am including the vast section of the working class that is dispossessed. I'm talking about, the students who are buried under loans, who are taking terrible jobs because they are doing those jobs. I'm talking about my neighbors who have lost their homes because they've lost their jobs and don't understand why. I'm talking about my next door neighbor who's a firefighter and losing his pension. These are people with whom we have to organize and work and help them understand that they are not different from people who are living in poverty today. They are one class, one cause. We are in a new period that provides new opportunities, but is also a very deeply troubling period that requires them to think and act deeply. People who shun poor people, they say, oh, I'm not, those are those people. I may have to work 3 jobs in order to feed my family. I may have to move back in with my parents and deal with all of the horrible circumstances of my upbringing because I can't get a job or because my job can't. This is that strata of society that is critical. Okay, if they can be helped to understand why they are in the situation that they're in, and not blame themselves, and not blame poor people, and not blame immigrants or jobs going overseas, if they can be helped to understand that there are other explanations than what they hear when they're channeling Fox News, and know that there are answers other than what they're getting from the corporate media. Yeah, that would help a lot.